Good evening and calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools regular Board of Education meeting. It is Wednesday, February the 21st, 2024. May we begin with the roll call, please, Charlotte?
Mr. Gagnon.
Present.
Mr. Goldman.
Here.
Dr. Harris.
Here.
Ms. Merrimon.
Here.
Mrs. Nazarella.
Present.
Dr. Thomas-Farquharson.
Here.
Mrs. Yagaloff.
Present.
Student Representative Liam Wright.
Here.
Student Representative Chris Ramal.
Excused. Thank you. And Liam, may you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order, and now it is time for public communications. This is where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions. Each person is allowed 3 minutes to speak, and we ask for you to please come to the podium and share your name and town of residence. Please be mindful of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time is expired, you will see a red card, and we ask for you please to respectfully take your seat at that time. Please be aware that we are attentively listening to all that's being shared. However, it is board policy that we do not comment to comments as they are being made. With this being the second meeting of the month, we are receiving comments on agenda items only. And the agenda items for this evening include financial report period ending December 31st, 2023, adoption of the CIP, accept and adoption new and revised policies, proposed calendar for 2025-2026 school year, increasing educator diversity plan, multi-year enrollment, and personnel actions. I do have a list here, however, no one has signed up on the list. So I will ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we will move on in the agenda to non-staff communications and reports, and this is where we're able to hear from our young people about what's happening in our high schools. We will receive an update on Hall from Liam. Passing to you, Liam.
Thank you. So there are many athletic updates that have occurred in the past couple of weeks. First off, wrestling just had their Class LL states, and Luke Abitamarco and Jonathan Wright Goodison placed and qualified for the State Open Championship, so congratulations to them. Track and field had their State Open Championships as well. The boys achieved 4th place, and the girls tied for 3rd with Conard. We had 4 individual winners or school records that occurred that weekend. Anna Siciliano won the shot put. The girls 4x800 team managed to win. The girls 4x4 team got 2nd place and also broke the school record. And I myself also won, and I got the meet and school record as well. The boys swimming and diving team are facing Conard tonight in a dual meet, and the boys basketball team will be in the state tournament coming up. Our concert jazz band competing in the Charles Mingus Festival in New York City, where they won the Best Big Band and also the Outstanding Brass and Rhythm sections, and there were also some soloist awards given out as well. And finally, Pops and Jazz tickets have gone on sale, and so you should get them while you can because they will run out quickly. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And Liam, please share once again what you did to get yourself recognition.
So I won the pole vault, and I broke the State Open meet record and also the school record.
Hey!
So,
Right.
thank you.
Congratulations. All right. You make us proud. Okay. All right. Well, as we know, Chris is absent. However, we're sure he has wonderful things to share with us the next time regarding what's happening at Conard. So thank our wonderful student representatives. And again, excellent job, Liam. All right. Moving on now to unfinished business, where we are having approval of the financial report for the period ending December 31st, 2023. So the last time we were together, we had a wonderful discussion regarding the financial report, robust discussion, so much discussion that we departed before voting on this report. So we certainly want to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. Therefore, we know the motion is already on the floor, which was that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending December 31st, 2023, which details projected fiscal year 2023-2024 financial reports. Again, with the motion being on the floor, we'll ask once again any questions or discussion. With that, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. Now moving on to adoption of the capital improvement plan for 2024-2025. We also have the recommendation that the Board of Education adopt the capital improvement plan for 2024-2025. So thank you so very much, teammates, for coming before us again. Again, we had this initially presented to us the last time, and this is the time for us to consider voting on it. So we'll pass the floor to you once again, please.
We're available for any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Murrow. So teammates, any questions regarding the capital improvement plan that was presented to us before? We've had some time to review and consider. Any remaining questions at all? Yes, Jason.
I know that we had a discussion at the last meeting about the 5-year HVAC plan, and that wasn't included going forward. Our understanding is that that's because with any luck, that may not be a requirement every 5 years.
We're unsure. And again, since you're only appropriating the next 2 years, we don't include things we're not sure of yet at this point. So we're hoping, as it's a non-recurring cost, that it may not be a recurring. So we'll see.
Other questions? Seeing none, again with the motion on the floor in regards to the capital improvement plan and approving it. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you both so very much. All right. Continuing on now to a motion by Lorna Thomas-Farquharson, Jason Gagnon, and Gayle Harris to accept new and revised policies as a second reading. Again, when we last were together, we presented these as a first reading, and this is in regard to the following policies. Let me formally share the recommendation once again, that the Board of Education accept and approve as a second and final reading the following new and revised policies, which were revised by the Board Policy Subcommittee, which include 5120, a new policy, meal charging, 5505, new policy, policy to improve completion rates of the free application for federal student aid, 5320, a revision, student discipline, suspension, and expulsion, 5630, revision, health assessments and screening, 5750, revision, student privacy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, good teammates. I heard Shannon, I also heard Gayle. Thank you both. Discussion. So again, teammates, we already reviewed these as a first reading. Many of these are ones that, as has been indicated, are revisions. Many of these are ones that will help us to be compliant with state and federal statutes and regulations. But are there any remaining questions or comments regarding the proposed policies? Seeing none, I will just go through each one for us to vote on. Policy 5120, meal charging. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. 5505, policy to improve completion rates of the free application for federal student aid. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. 5320, student discipline, suspension, and expulsion. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. 5630, health assessments and screening. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. 5750, student privacy. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you all so very much. Dr. Murrow, thank you so very much. Moving right along to new business, where we have a proposed calendar for the 2025-2026 school year as a first reading. The recommendation is that the Board of Education review as a first reading the proposed. Oh, thank you. Okay, all right. The recommendation of the Board of Education review as a first reading the proposed calendar for the 2025-2026 school year. Passing it to our superintendent.
Thank you very much. Apologies before. So for those board members that have served before, you'll likely remember that we approve our school calendars 2 years in advance, excluding this first year. So we're looking tonight at the 2025-2026 school calendar. We do this in such advance in order to be able to provide our families with adequate time for planning and things of this nature. The adoption of the school calendar used to be somewhat more complex when each school district kind of did its own thing, but as I believe I was sharing with a couple of folks before the meeting, several years ago now, perhaps 8 or 9 years ago, there was a movement to publish regional calendars that school districts were asked to consider. They don't have to adopt them, but we look across, and in the greater Hartford region, we're all generally on the same calendar with differences that are specific to the wants and needs of our community. So as you can see in the calendar that's before you, we have our typical starting as we have had for many years, with the first day of school being on a Wednesday in late August. That enables students to kind of come back in with a 3-day week followed by a 4-day week before they hit their first full 5-day week. And it makes for an effective transition, especially for those youngest students, kindergartners, first graders, for whom kind of that separation anxiety becomes a little bit of a concern. I'm told, Leon can correct me, the upperclassmen seem to like it too. Of note for this year, there was conversation several board meetings back about the addition of Diwali in the calendar. So you'll notice that on October the 31st, in addition to all of the holidays that we have historically celebrated. This places the end of the school year proposed for June 12th, snow days willing. And you'll notice the only other thing that we have blocked off formally is June 19th in the event that we had that many snow days, or really for planning purposes with the start of summer school. We have been avoiding June 19th, given that it is Juneteenth, and we just wanted to have that formally designated on the calendar as a non-makeup day should and a day for which we do not plan summer school events should that ever be in question. So those are really the highlights. I'm happy to take any questions, and just by virtue of process, I think Lorna already said it, but this is a first reading, so that if you have questions and if there's feedback from the community, there's ample time for you to receive that before this is brought forward for a second reading and an ultimate vote and passage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vicinis. Before we move on with discussion, I do want to formally have the motion on the floor. So is there a motion that the Board of Education review as a first reading the proposed calendar for the 2025-2026 school year?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Claire. Discussion. Ethan and then Claire.
So last time, and I don't remember if you were involved or this was prior, there was a question of when do we determine there should be a holiday and when there shouldn't be a religious holiday? I don't have a conceptual problem with Diwali, but is it 2% or is it 20%? Some kind of standard, and I realize you can't have anything hard and fast, and you can't, people, religion is private to them. It just seems somewhere we should have some kind of, how do we determine? And I don't know if we made any progress on that, but I figured I'd ask the question again.
Certainly, no. I don't recall if I was formally in the seat at the time, but I do clearly remember the conversation. And really, it's a question because I think you may be asking, is that a percentage? A percentage of what? A percentage of the population that we have, a percentage of folks from whom we hear from, or so on. I think it's this body and it's this process right now as we're proposing this, and the opportunity for public to provide you feedback, and for us as a board and you as a board to certainly kind of receive that feedback and think on it and see what additional questions that it poses that would help to determine, is that crossing a threshold, or is that at a point where you'd want to make a decision for or against a particular holiday. But your question is well received in terms of understand is there going to be a formal metric or a formal algorithm that says we need to get this many signatures or what have you. We do not have something as scientific as that. I think it's really been a question of whom do we hear from in terms of the community, and how do we respond to those needs.
So just to follow up on that, has there been, because I don't know, I mean, with Diwali, just because that was the last holiday that was selected, so is that
I
something
haven't
you
heard
guys
any
got feedback?
new feedback. I imagine tonight's discussion, could perhaps engender some feedback.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how we decide. Thank you.
If I, oh, Claire, no, you go ahead, Claire. If I may, I received the question well also. Thank you. I just want to make sure, with understanding where we are, because we already did vote to add it to the calendar, any actions at this point would be suggesting to vote to remove it from the calendar. And so I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but just want to be clear in terms of the status of Diwali at this time.
So I have nothing to say that it should be taken off. On the other hand, I'm not sure who else may walk in the door and say, I have and again, I don't know, but.
No, again, very, very much respect the question. And I know before you were clear in sharing it as well in terms of what metrics are we using. And so we certainly did have lessons learned from before, and moving forward, certainly do want to consider that further. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page with where we are specific to Diwali.
I have nothing to say that Diwali shouldn't be the holiday, but nothing to say it should.
Claire.
Yeah, so unfortunately, asking families and doing a poll and having anyone have to reveal their religious practice isn't legal. So it's very hard to know that number that you would like. So, I mean, that's the challenge. How do you determine when you can't ask the question?
So what you possibly could do, and this is just a suggestion, is have maybe houses of worship or nearby adjacent houses of worship, because they're not always in West Hartford. So it's just something to think about. I'd love to see an answer. I realize you can't ask people, although some people volunteer. I just would like it to be more scientific with materialities. And again, I don't have the answers, but I'm good.
Claire, yes.
Yeah, I just had a request or a suggestion in that winter recess comes right up, or the holiday recess. The first day off is December 24th. And is it possible to have the 23rd to be an early release? I know that's been done in the past, and it's been added that the day before the holiday is an early release. But the question is, can it be decided sooner than later so that it is in the calendar?
Yes, so we don't, to my knowledge, we don't have a space where we indicate that early release, but it is our practice that it's an early release. In fact, this year, that was one of the things very early on in the year, sort of hearing that same question and concern, made that announcement very early in the year. And then as we got to board meetings coming up more close, to say, it has been our practice, and it would be my intent to continue the practice that on the 23rd, the day before the holiday break, we would follow a Wednesday early release schedule. There's just no formal designation of that. It's sort of reminding people and attempting to make sure they know that, yes, we've heard that feedback, and that, as far as I can recall, I think we've done that at least for the last 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the last time we did not.
But it's never been in the calendar?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Other questions or comments? I just had a comment. Latoya.
I just wanted to say that I actually really appreciate having seeing Diwali on here. I think that, with the town's commitment to equity and inclusion, I think it's a really positive step. I think it's kind of hard to get scientific about inclusion and equity. I think it's more of it's based on, opening space to be relational. And I also think that it sends a message that West Hartford is welcoming to all people from all backgrounds, regardless of whatever the percentage of people who practice certain religions or come from certain ethnic backgrounds, but that we are a space that welcomes everyone in their space to celebrate your religions, your beliefs. And so I think it's just a really great step in the right direction. So I appreciate it.
Other questions or comments? All right, again, this is a first reading, so we'll come together the next time to vote. Yes, Ethan.
Unrelated question to before. Veterans Day, it's school in session, is that just more to honor veterans, or is that, okay.
Yeah, school is in session. That we've had school in session on Veterans Day. I'm told that I was in the district as a teacher when we didn't, and there was a change. I honestly don't remember the change, but it's been probably 15 or 20 years since we have been hosting school in Veterans Day. And typically, what we're doing on Veterans Day is we're hosting a lot of different veteran led activities, inviting folks into the schools, and giving talks, having assemblies at certain grade levels. So we recognize our veterans that way. And speaking specifically for the West Hartford veterans community with whom I have these conversations, they're very appreciative of the ability to be able to educate children and not just have it be a day off, but have it be a day in which the reasons for its celebration can be shared with youth.
So I think it was more than 20 years, because I did it for my youngest daughter, and
Okay.
it was very nice.
Very good.
I didn't do it for the oldest didn't have it, but my youngest did.
We will invite you back this
No,
year.
it's-
Absolutely.
Past my time. Thank you.
Never past your time. The respect is always there for both you and Mr. Vicinas, a veteran also. Active, so I don't know a veteran yet. Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments regarding the calendar? Okay, thank you. Moving on now to increasing educator diversity plan. And so we have a recommendation that the Board of Education accept and approve the increasing educator diversity plan. And so we have our teammates all coming before us, and we'll pass the baton.
As they're setting up, I know they just need a minute. They're going to have a presentation come down behind them. I'm going to give some quick background that the increasing educator diversity plan and the formal presentation to the board, while a new legislative requirement, is in no way, shape, or form any sort of a new effort for West Hartford Public Schools. You have long had as one of your Board of Education goals a very specific goal to increase educator diversity in the district, and Mr. Duarte does an excellent job, as his predecessor did, in terms of not only working on both recruitment and retention, but providing those metrics that help to support our achievement and our progress relative to this goal. And in partnership with Teresa Rangel, who, as you know, is our Director of Equity Advancement, and the team of amazing professionals, Shannon and Marcelo, I will let them be formally introduced. They represent a subset of a group that's working hard at this and are present with you tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Duarte to introduce everyone and start it off.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Vicinas. You've jumped ahead, I think, 3 slides for us, but that's okay. I'm used to that. So we know for certain that having a diverse teaching staff is essential for promoting equity, inclusivity, and academic success for all students. And I think that's really important to remember. And that when we went into this, and one of the things that we always focus on in my office is recruitment, retention, and hiring. And I think you've heard me up here mention different things that we do, all of it very intentional. For the purposes of today and for the purposes of this activity, it is looking at increasing educator diversity, particularly related to that concept. But, when we took a look at this, we really wanted to look at and even a broader lens and thinking about what's diversity for the teaching staff. And so even we went back and started looking at, thinking of my high school days, and you get certain courses where we would get, one of our technology education teachers who was in the field and now actually went and left the field and is teaching, and to see how valuable that was to students, or even some of our science teachers who were actual marine biologists and then decided they wanted to go into education. And so, I know that for the purposes of this specific conversation, that's not necessarily what the state was looking for, but it really got us to really, I think, open up that umbrella and to continue to look at those pieces and thinking about just the benefit that brings for all students. So, again, we had received back on July 1st of this year that Public Act 23-167, Section 10 was passed, which essentially required all districts to submit an increasing educator diversity plan. So the goal will be at the end of this meeting that the board will approve the plan and that I will work on submitting it to the state. And so every district will need to do that. Every district will then put the plan up on the Board of Ed's website. We'll also decide to include it in other aspects because it's going to be outward facing so that people can take a look at that piece. And the plan really was requiring us to take a look at, I'd say, 3 specific key areas. They wanted us to take a look at recruitment, hiring and selection, and retention. And so those will be the things that we'll walk through today. I wanted to just quickly give a huge thank you to the committee members, so you can see all of them up here. Really, really want to thank them because they gave of their own time, and you can see the various backgrounds they come from to really, I think both Teresa and I, when we started to look at this, thought it would be really important to get various stakeholders in there that each bring a little bit of a different perspective with, a classroom teacher, an administrator, a union person, all of that. And then someone on the town side too, because again, I think we know that some of this is really just looking and starting to create some different partnerships and different avenues to be able to, I'd like to say, I think recruit, right? That's one of the pieces that we'll start with. But we all know that probably one of the most important too is that retention side. And so again, I won't steal some of my colleagues' thunder here like someone else did to me, but we'll move on. And as you can see, I've brought 3 friends with me. I think all of you know Teresa, our Executive Director of Equity Advancement. I have Shannon here on my right. Shannon is our Aiken Elementary School principal, and she is also the WHAA Vice President. So she was wearing those 2 hats for us. And then I have Dr. Marcello here as well with me, who is one of our teachers. And so he was able to bring that lens as well. And so I think you'll see some of the other members that aren't here with me today, but really just contributed, and we met multiple times over multiple weeks and did a lot of work offline with just wordsmithing and looking at that to make sure that we really felt very comfortable with this plan. And so the piece that I'll just sort of take a look at is we thought it would be important to ultimately craft a vision, and a vision that really outlines our aspirations and our long-term goals for the work. And it was really sort of our guiding principle throughout all of this work, and we kept coming back to it. And when we'd get to a bit of a stumbling block or perhaps a debate on something, we'd go back and sort of recenter ourselves and say, does this align with our vision? And so I'll take a quick minute just to read it for especially for our folks at home too. Is our vision for recruiting, hiring, and selection in West Hartford is to build a diverse staff that mirrors our community. We are committed to evidence-based practices, intentional recruitment, and transparent processes to create an equitable, inclusive environment. Our goal is to attract, hire, and retain a team of educators who reflect our student diversity and exhibit instructional strategies that support all students to maximize their learning and develop the habit of mind that lead to success. So I know it was a bit wordy, but I think visions sometimes tend to be that way. I think it really encompasses what we were trying to do and to go from there. And so then the next piece we wanted to look at, all right, now that we have this vision, we thought it'd be important to have a theory of action. And so for us, is that theory of action is really what led to help us lead to specific results or changes. And so, we've crafted this, which again, I'll read quickly for you, is West Hartford Public Schools actively implement evidence-based practices centered around intentional recruitment efforts, transparent hiring processes, and ongoing support for the professional development and advancement of a diverse workforce. Then we retain a diverse workforce and create an equitable and inclusive environment. And so those are really the things that sort of got us going and to really started moving us towards the next pieces of. The first one was taking a look at recruitment. And so our first goal for recruitment is recruit and hire educators from underrepresented racial or ethnic groups to increase their representation within our workforce and better align with the diverse demographics of our student population. And I think that last sentence, because we've wrestled a lot with, and trying to figure out, what does this look like? What should we be doing? How do we target that? And I think that was the sentence that all of us really said, like, aha, that's it, right? It's really that align with our student demographics. And so, you may ask, hey, well, how are we doing? So I pulled this data for you to get a sense of where we are. And this is our data over the past 10 years. And so what you'll see here is that we're certainly trending in the right direction, but that gain, that slope has been slow. And what I like to look at, as we talked about, is how do we look at when we look at our student representation, and so right now we're sitting at about 45% compared to where our actual hires are, and that's at about 9.4% this year. And so, I think that's what sort of gave us that nice little number to take a look at and to start to really think about, okay, how are we doing? And what's really neat about this is you can go on to the state's website. They've compiled all this, so it's really transparent. And you can go district by district and just take a look at, how it measures and how you want to look at these pieces. Because I think that was something that we really kind of struggled with in the beginning was, what do we look at and what are we really talking about when we look at these pieces? And so we came up with what are essentially our recruitment strategies and some key activities that we would want to target for our goal of recruitment. And so our first one is, as you know, I currently attend many of the different job fairs and go to different places wherever they're doing them. Actually, last year, Shannon and I recruited her to come with me to UConn. And so we went up there. And one of the things that we're going to make sure that we do is that Teresa gets to come with me to all of these career fairs. So I'm really excited to take her to all of these, but I think, and you mentioned it before, I think it really speaks to the commitment of the district, right? It's not just me coming, the HR directors, I'm bringing our equity director as well. And so that she can also talk about some of the different efforts and some of the things that we're doing here within the district. We do a lot of publicizing of different job openings in Indeed and other different things, and really wanting to look at, there's different publications that are out there, different networks that really have a better target audience and are have that component and will help us, I think, in just making sure people are aware that we've got these opportunities. And interestingly, it's one of the things that I have to sometimes battle when I'm talking to different candidates is getting them to really understand who West Hartford is, getting them to really understand what are our student demographics. I think oftentimes people have this belief of what West Hartford is and what our schools may look like, and they say, that's not really, where I'm looking to be, or that's not really what I'm looking to do. I'm like, well, have you actually looked at our student demographics? Have you actually looked at what we are? And I know we've got a lot of great things going on in West Hartford, but there's a lot of stuff and that also we want to make sure people are aware of. Looking and really, I think, just creating some different partnerships with different institutes and different, where we can really, I think, be, I guess, the first person to talk to potential candidates. One of the things that we realized quickly I did last year was by the time I was getting up to, and we saw that when we got to UConn, many of these folks had already had jobs. I mean, the number of, there were, I think, 4 large tables of name tags that candidates were supposed to come get so they can wear them. They were all still sitting there. And I went and asked them, I'm like, where is everybody? And the person was like, oh yeah, they're not coming. They all have jobs already. And so we realized, hey, we've got to figure out how to get in front of people before they've accepted or signed anything. And so I know Teresa's done some different partnerships with getting out and actually meeting with some folks. I have 2 interviews next week with students essentially that are graduating, because I want them to hear from us before they go and officially sign anywhere. And we're even talking about, looking and exploring some different partnerships with our historically black colleges and universities, and even different places like maybe in Puerto Rico and things like that. I know Paul is very open to that, to take a look at like, hey, we need to step outside of our norm and what we're so used to, and just let people know, because I think there is a lot. And even, when we talk about today's calendar conversation, I think that is a conversation that we want people to know, like this is a welcoming community. Take a look at that. And so what One of the reasons we wanted to work with folks that were not just in education is because we know that if we can recruit people to come here, there's a lot more that comes with that, right? If I'm moving from, say, North Carolina or South Carolina or Puerto Rico and coming to West Hartford, Connecticut, what are the different supports that we would need? And some of them actually go beyond the school system and go into the public side. How does it work with getting some housing? How do you tell people, hey, I think Teresa talked about like, hey, here's where you go get your hair done, which wasn't my concern, but I know that she said that some people have that. And so just really making sure that people know, like, hey, make them feel welcome and know that there's places and things here to do. And you've probably heard us talk about our Future Educators of Diversity, so we continue to have those 2 programs at both our high schools. We're thrilled, and we've seen some students that actually have gone through. I had a student of mine when I was a principal that went, finished, and we hired him, and he came back and did some things. And so that was really exciting for us to start to see, that paying its dividend. But that's certainly a long-term investment, right? When we're getting someone that's a freshman in high school and we're excited about getting them in our pipeline, it's going to take some time to see the return on that investment, but it's something that we certainly are committed to and want to continue to do that. And then our last one that we have here, which I will be super excited, hopefully my next presentation for you to have the video for you, is that we really wanted to put together, I guess I'll call it, for lack of better terms, a marketing video, but it was more just to be able to put out there. So when people go on our websites, right now, oftentimes people are logging on to the human resources site to look for what jobs are there. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, this isn't really selling us, right? I want a video. I want our kids up there. I want our teachers up there. I want all of those different professionals so that people can get a sense of, hey, what's the culture in that location, particularly if someone's not from here, right? And so we're working on that video. I've seen the first draft of it, and I know some people needed extra time to rehearse their lines. Some other folks were willing to just go and to make it. But we're really comfortable and excited that that's going to be a great place to send people to. And even for us, as we put our business cards and get just little QR readers, little things like that people can just say, oh, your card, click on it and watch these great videos. So that's really the piece on recruitment, and I will turn it over to Teresa. Yes?
Yes. You dare to turn it over to me after making those shots about needing extra time is great. Yeah, you didn't, but you did. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the hiring and selection goal that we have, which is, what did I just do? Sorry, it's really funny. Our goal is to enhance educator diversity in the workforce by increasing both the number of educators of color applicants who are interviewed and the number of educators of color who are ultimately hired. And the next slide actually gives you a little bit more context to why that is our goal. So you have some data from this last round of hiring that just went by. And so the total number of applicants actually was that 989 plus 117 applicants who chose not to identify their race. And then we had a total of 209 applicants of color. And as we started going through this process, one of the things that was really highlighted as the team really looked through is that there was a lot of information that we actually didn't have. So when we asked, okay, so how many people were interviewed, that was a big question mark. So we put that question mark there as an accountability measure for ourselves, right? There are things that we need to do better and we need to be paying closer attention to understand what's happening throughout our hiring and selection process so that we actually have some metrics that we can look at. And we've, so out of the total number of people hired, which there were 60, 13 of those people were people of color, ended up being people of color. So we just had a lot of questions. We had more questions, to be honest with you, as a committee, as a group, than we had answers. And so that necessitates us taking a look at our processes and really working to understand what happens once people come to West Hartford and they apply and they get through the process. So in talking about that, what we've decided to do as a team is really to adjust our selection process to be more inclusive. The great thing about having a team of people that were together, some of us have worked in other places and we're able to bring all the best ideas from what we have seen. And one of the ideas that came to surface was this idea of screening applicants out versus screening them in. I've been a building principal and I know what that's like. pre-COVID days, you'd have a teaching opening and you'd have about 300 applicants for a position. And we all know that bringing in 300 people when you're working as a singleton is just not feasible. But there are some ways that we can combine our talents together and look at applicants and give each applicant an opportunity to be heard by committee with some questions that are common questions. Another thing that popped up was that we didn't have a set of questions that were common across all the buildings. You have 11 elementary schools, and your screener questions weren't the same in each building. So we're really looking to bring us up to just really standard best practice when it comes to hiring, and adding some of these pieces in that will allow us to really get, if you're looking to apply to West Hartford, that you're going to have an opportunity to be able to be heard and have an opportunity to be in front of people. As a principal, and I'll just talk about my prior practice, we ended up taking a lot of shortcuts because it was like, oh, do you know somebody? Oh, I had somebody who was a really great substitute. And that process, when you think about equity and you think about people having an opportunity to actually be even spoken to in the process, those are things that are well-meaning, because we're not looking to spend all this time and you're pulling people in for these teams for these interviews. Although well-meaning, has an impact, and the impact is you are advantaging certain people, right? It's whether or not you were in the building, whether or not you were my niece graduated or whatever. And so I'm again, true stories of a former principal. This was how it was happening, and so in order to make sure that these things aren't happening, we need to kind of have some things that are in common that kind of guide our practice as we move ahead. And so we're looking at kind of adding some of those pieces, as well as really ensuring that we talk about biases, and we as we start, when you pull together your committee, and you sit down to have interviews, that we have that conversation up front, because there is such thing as an affinity bias, right? You tend to hire people who you have things in common with, right? Who look like you, who pray like you, who love like you. Like that's a human element that we have to actually, challenge ourselves to ensure that when we're going through this process, that we're being authentic as we go through this process, and that we're really looking for the best candidate for the position, and that we're not just kind of leaning on this natural affinity bias that we do have as human beings. And then our last piece of this really was just to clearly communicate our commitment to diversity during the hiring process, like everywhere we go. It's another reason why, Julia and I will be, best buds as we go out on the road, beating the bush for students. I got to spend a lot of time in the last couple of weeks. UConn has been gracious enough to invite me in to come in to talk to students who are getting ready to graduate. And one of the things that we did talk about is, please don't sign with someone before you actually get an opportunity. And the other thing that I kept pushing with them is that, it's not just taking any job. Align yourself with your values and take a position with a place that aligns with your values. And so, really trying to get, students who are graduating to understand that that is actually really the most important decision, especially as you're just starting out as a teacher. So I'm excited that we're tackling some of the things that need to be tackled, and that we've kind of set a course. But that is my section, I believe, for hiring and selection, and I'm going to pass it along to Marcella.
Attention.
Yeah,
Or
that's you.
Oh, okay, that's me. So it's been an interesting process to work on the committee, and all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, it's kind of my life, because I've been recruited by West Hartford about 25 years ago from Argentina. And then I was selected, hired, and retained in West Hartford. I've always been proud. It's interesting because I've always been aligned to the values of West Hartford, and I'm glad that we need to do more of that. I'm here in light of a shortage. Long story short, I became American about 10 years ago or so, and also diverse. I'm within the diversity of teachers as well. So when it comes to retention, some of the strategies is to continue to develop a comprehensive onboarding program that introduces new hires to the organization to see and to understand the value of who we are. And as I was saying, also, we match and in both directions. And the whole thing has to be keywords that come in mind, and Julie was saying before, in the theory of action, things have to be explicit and intentional. That's what resounds all the time. We cannot miss the focus of we're working on increasing educational diversity. And that's what it should be the focus, because as I was reading the state literature and also literature outside, just here and there, as in between classes and whatever, teaching. And it's a key thing that to focus on. The purpose is increasing educational diversity. And because it tends to sometimes get involved with other things, and then it dissipates and vanishes. And so we cannot miss that focus. And that ties into the next strategies to initiate and implement a year-long mentorship program. We already have a team program, but they should be separate from a team program, and this is what we recommend. Again, aligned with the intentional and explicit towards increasing educator diversity. And also to continue the support of employee affinity groups, focus on various diversity dimensions. We've had in the district different affinity groups, for example, the Equity Diversity Council. Am I in the right?
Yes,
on the
you
right?
are. Yep,
Okay.
I got you.
Okay, thank you. And professional development and diversity training, conduct, and I would say continue regular diversity and inclusion training sessions for all employees. We all have different, I believe as a teacher, that we all have different level of comfort, and we need a constant reminders and updating, like with any topic, but again, the topic of increasing education diversity. So it's like a permanent and ongoing for all educators at all different levels. And provide access to training and professional development opportunities. And finally, to tailor development programs to meet the specific needs and aspirations of individuals from diverse backgrounds.
And so this topic of retention, retention is the #1 topic for, when you think about recruitment, right, is you want to retain the staff that you have. It's so big that it's actually our largest, and so we're going to pass it down to Principal.
It's okay. Thank you. And again, I think when we're looking at retention, we're always looking through that equity and diversity lens. But I think one of the takeaways that we've really had through this process is how can we be more intentional when we're doing that? And I think when we're looking for those equal opportunities for growth, it's not just at a district level, but also looking for those leadership opportunities at a building level, right? At their core, every staff member, just like every child and family, wants to feel like they belong. So it's our job as leaders in the building to make sure that we're giving those opportunities. Who are we looking to when we're looking to help plan or facilitate building level professional development? And that could look different in different ways. It could be at a CSI. It could be asking someone to help with a staff meeting. It could even be helping to facilitate a team meeting. So really looking not just district-wide, but also building-wide. Who do we have on our leadership teams? Who do we have as part of our reading teams, our math teams? Who are we looking to help us with that process? And then also looking that one of the things that actually, this is the first year that they've had that, is we have a program specifically with CCSU for an 092 educational leadership program that's geared specifically toward West Hartford public school teachers. So right now we have about 20 teachers that are part of that cohort. They have a lot of virtual meetings. They work around the West Hartford public school schedule, and all of the in-person meetings are on site in West Hartford. So that's a really, it's been a nice way to build leadership, but also looking at what is the diversity of the staff that are accessing that program and making sure is everyone aware of that program, how the program works. And there's a difference between just putting it out in a flyer and really going to someone and saying, you know what, I think this might be a really good opportunity for you. Let's talk about this. We also offer a tuition reimbursement program that staff can access. It's $1,500 per school year that can also help with career advancement. And that's also another way as you move through and gain additional coursework, you also move up the pay scale. which increases their salary over time. But that's another piece where it's something that's in the contract, but how widely known is that to all staff members that that's something that they can also access? And then we also want to look at one of the things we talked about were those regular check-ins. And how do we do that? How do we really show people that we have that open door forum for an opportunity to get feedback, ask for feedback, and accept that feedback? You know, we offer exit interviews if someone's choosing to leave, but by that point it's too late. We need to be much more proactive in that, and not just offering those in-person opportunities, but also seeking that feedback in those check-ins in a variety of ways. For some people, it may be more comfortable to do something on a survey or something that's anonymous. So how do we make sure that those are ongoing opportunities in a variety of ways so that we're really connecting and making sure that people, again, are feeling like they belong and that they want to stay here? And if there is a concern that they have, that we're able to have a place to voice that and then address it. And then we also want to make sure that it's more widely known about our employee assistance program, which offers a lot of different community-wide resources that is available to employees also. That's something, again, when you get hired, you kind of get their brochure, but how do we continue to message that and make people aware that that is there? So those are just some of the things that we've talked about over the last few months in our meetings, you know, really focusing on that hiring, the recruitment, and then retention.
So I hope that in our presentation that you've seen that we really did take this, which, you know, could have been a compliance task, but really at the end of the day, and that was something that I appreciated so much from the committee, because when we got together, we said, listen, this is not about a compliance task, because I can do the compliance piece by myself. What I need is a group that's really going to help us think about how can we get better with that continuous improvement model always in mind. And the piece that I think we really looked at too is the retention piece. Because we know that's a key component, and if I can go out there and Teresa and I can go and everyone can recruit, like that's just one component, but the key is too, we want to make sure that not only do we keep our employees, but that they're happy and they want to be here, right? Because we know at the end of the day, if someone's happy and they want to come to work, that we believe that that ultimately is going to come out and create a better classroom environment for our students, which is really the goal at the end of the day for all of this. So I hope that you found that presentation helpful, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you all so very much. Questions, comments regarding what has been shared? Yes, LaToya.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. My heart is like beaming. I love it. I love all of it. I love it so much. So I hear about the tuition reimbursement every year, and just wondered, are there any other kind of financial supports? Because I'm thinking, I know $1,500 a year is great, but if I'm a teacher and I want to get my 092, those programs are so expensive. And so when I think about the equity piece, and I see money as like a big factor with that in terms of that education gap. So are there other things, even outside of the district, that we kind of are thinking about?
Yeah, I know, and Teresa and I haven't had a real opportunity to sit down and work through some of that, but I can say, like, I know with her predecessor that we would, and when I'd have people that would come to me, you know, I'd point them in her direction, and that we would look for, hey, look at the different universities. Honestly, sometimes it's calling their financial aid office and saying, hey, here's what I'd love to apply, but what do you have for me? And the truth is, for many of our educators, like, there's a lot out there. You might have to do a little bit of extra work, right? But I think that's the same for our students. I can't tell you how many times, like, hey, here's a scholarship. You just got to fill this out, because a lot of it goes unclaimed. It's also promoting some of the loan forgiveness. There's a lot out there. Almost every day in my office, I'm getting one to sign off for people to submit that. And so I think, you know, sometimes we're our own worst enemies, because I think we're so busy, and particularly our teachers, they're so busy that you kind of let some of that stuff slide. And it's like, hey, let's make sure that everyone knows, which I think speaks to Shannon's point, is you have to keep like pushing out emails and, hey, just a reminder, here's this loan forgiveness. Hey, just a reminder, fill out your tuition reimbursement, and really partnering with the teachers union to say, hey, you guys do your part too, and getting word out to in the different scholarships, because I know they have access to some scholarships that I don't even have access or know know about through their organization. So, but I appreciate you bringing it up because I will say that has been a topic of conversation. Even when we looked at starting the 092 program, trying to figure out, hey, you're talking, sometimes $15,000, $20,000, and depending on where you are in your life situation, that's not always easy, and it can be scary if you just finished your loans to be like, all right, let me start over again, to do all of those.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to hear that folks can come to you too to sit down and have those conversations and get connected to some of those resources. So thank you.
Jason.
First of all, just thank you. I always leave these meetings with such a profound sense of pride and gratitude for all the work that you do, all the work the teachers do in the district. This is such important work. I mean, we're all here in part because we've had teachers in our lives who have meant something special to us, who have touched us in some way. All the more powerful when we see ourselves reflected in those teachers. So again, thank you. We saw some statistics on recruitment. Do we have any idea of how we're doing on retention?
Yeah, and so, one of the things that we look at the retention piece, and I present that at our opening schools report. The challenge is that the reason why oftentimes some of our retention numbers, or we lose folks, I'll call it, it's things that are outside of people's control. And so what we're actually doing now, and it'll be something that we'll actually report, Paul will report it out on our district profile piece, that'll be public knowledge as well, is when an individual is resigning, I send them a survey and it's anonymous and say, please fill this out and tell us why. Because I think that's, most times people will just say for personal reasons, and then I'll call or ask for interviews, and it's like, hey, you know what, my spouse moved to this, I gotta go, or this situation happened or that. And so I think what we're trying to figure out is, those are what I would consider most out of our control, is I wanna know, are we losing folks because they just don't feel comfortable, or there's a different opportunity? Like, are there things within our control that I think we can do better that we want to know about? And then it's just trying to figure out what are those. And so, like I said, when I present our opening schools, most of the people that are leaving, it really has to do with a life situation, I'll call it, where things change. And I think what we're trying to do is figure out, okay, especially for our teachers that are phenomenal and are leaving, hey, I had one I just met with, she just had her second baby and she was hoping to come back, and she's like, you know what, this isn't going to work for me, is, hey, that's great, do what you need to do, but keep me in mind when you're ready. Like, call me right here and I'll be here, and just call, and so that we can make sure that folks like that, who we know are great, we want to get them back. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jason.
No, it does. Thank you. And then one more, which is, in an age where, the headlines are all recruitment and retention is everything, there's a teacher shortage. Do you see this as really kind of a feather in West Hartford's cap in terms of being able to attract? And we've been very lucky. Maybe this helps us continue to be lucky.
Yeah, and I don't want to answer all the questions, but the only thing the only thing I will agree and disagree, I'll push back and say I don't think it's lucky. I think it's intentional. And I think the work that we do, the work that the board supports, I think that's very intentional work.
I think that's less may have been more.
Yes. Yeah, but I also know that comes with, ultimately making a statement on what you prioritize. And I think that our challenge is to get that out to folks that are in different districts or that are in schools. And I love how Teresa says is, don't just take the first job offer. I remember, and when I applied for a job, it was different times. Like, you got a job offer, you're like, yes, right? I didn't even need to see it. I'm just saying yes, but it is a different market. And, I can't tell you how often I meet with candidates now, and it's not a yes right away. They're like, well, let me see my other offer. And I always say to them, hey, listen, I get it, I respect it, but at the end of the day, what we know too is that most people, salary is not the number one reason why people are not happy in a job, and the research shows is they're looking for leadership opportunities, and that's why I appreciate Shannon's pieces, and we're really trying to be deliberate about like tapping different people on the shoulders. I know when I was a principal, I had my go-to people, right? They're always willing to raise their hand, but I would say, hey, it's like that kid in the classroom that's the back never raises their hand, and when you call on them, they give you this beautiful answer, right? And it's the same thing, like, hey, tap some of the people that never volunteer to be leaders. The other piece that we see is people are ultimately satisfied when there's solid professional development that they find relevant. And so again, to answer your question, Jason, yeah, I think we've got two structures in place that really help us meet. you know, the why someone would want to be here, and not only want to be here, but be happy when they're here. I don't know too many other districts that have our professional development model, the work that Ann McKernan and her team and Paul used to do, really being deliberate and intentional about that professional development. You're just not going to find that anywhere else. And again, with our principals, I mean, you're not going to find better principals that are going to be deliberate about tapping people on the shoulder to make sure, even if it's recruit, hey, did you see this 092 program? You should go. You'd be great. You know, and that's what it takes sometimes for someone to see that. So a lot of the strategies that we use that work so great on our kids, like sometimes I say, hey, do the same thing, but now for your teachers, right?
Shannon.
So just to echo what others have said, it's really exciting to be on the other side of the equation, because I was at the State Department of Education in the talent office writing the plan that required then that districts create these plans. And so to see you breathe life into it and do it in a way that is not a compliance exercise is a model that I hope is being, I'm sure there's opportunities probably at the state level to hear from districts about how they've approached this work. And I think this is really exciting to see just I think the collective input that you've gathered to bring it together. One thing I just was curious, well, this might be conflating some issues, but I noticed a couple times the reference to IED instead of DEI in different documents, and I'm just curious why that is, because I think it could be confusing for people. I also think that this may be going above and beyond, but we've added B to DEIB for belonging, and that's gone a really long way. As somebody who works at an organization I spend every single day working on hiring and retention, we've added that and then emphasized that in our hiring processes, and that's been something that applicants seem to really connect with. And as a hiring kind of strategy, when you talked about screening in, we use it. I don't know if this is even allowed based on what your protocols are for hiring, but we've started doing a one-way video interview that allows us to get, instead of kind of a person's time going through 900 applicants, we can do a really quick way of getting, if the candidate is really serious about the role, it puts it on them to put forward the screener questions, and then you kind of get right away to the people who are committed and interested, and then you have a platform that allows a lot of different people to access the videos and see them, and then that diverse, and we've seen a lot more diversifying in who submits, because we kind of say, like, if this resume is generally reflective of somebody that we think would be interested in this role, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and do that screener as a way to be inclusive, but it's also efficient with the process. So just a couple of thoughts, and I have so much more I could ask about, but just excited to see where this is going, and would love to hear updates along the way on progress, because I know that Connecticut as a state is pretty behind the ball in terms of our overall representation of educators of color compared with students of color. And so we're all grappling with it. And I would hate for districts to be like vying against one another to get to the same goal that we're trying to get to as a state.
So just, I want to just respond to your, the IED versus DEI, and that's really because it was standing for literally the increasing educator diversity. So, yeah, that was. Yes, exactly, yeah, no, absolutely. 'Cause I was like, yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's exactly it. It was just the acronym for the increasing educator diversity piece, but thank you.
Claire.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the report. And I'm glad that you've done some of the work before. You can fine tune and then meet the deadline that the state has put, and this is very impressive. As to retention, one of the things that I really appreciate about West Hartford is the Masters Plus 10 hike in pay that you give. It's very rare. Most districts require you to have your 6th year. And so to get that bump every 10 credits, also you don't make people do sanctioned programs. You can take courses and things that just make you a better teacher. Maybe I don't want my 092 and be an administrator or a reading specialist, but there are so many courses you can take to be a better teacher. And also another thing that really encourages teachers is when you start doing the routine for so many years, the foundation for West Hartford Public Schools and grant opportunities add that excitement where something's different. So I see what's being written about, and what I hear going on in the school is there's no one school year that's the same in any elementary. There's always some new project, something that makes, learning exciting. As far as the leadership track, I'm glad to see that you're looking at that differently. A big pet peeve I had was the leadership track was by principal recommendation only. And I was one of these teachers that kept wanting to be recommended, and there was no opt-in. And I think there are a lot of teachers that if they're given the PD opportunity, they're given a chance to build some of their leadership skills, that they might see a leadership in themselves that they didn't see, and then they can come and say to the principal, I've got something to offer. But principals don't always know all the talent and all the aspirations. So I think it's really important to keep the staff on their toes, giving them opportunities. So, I do think my feeling is that most teachers I know that leave have really good reasons, but they're usually not finding a better school. They're leaving for many reasons, but I don't hear about many getting a better job opportunity. The other thing, you didn't mention anything about the teacher residency program and how that might be a method of taking some of our paraeducators and people within the district, giving them an opportunity to become a teacher without the financial burden, doing it in a safe environment where they're already comfortable and at home. But then how do you, what kind of commitment do those teachers that go through the program have to the district? Because we'd hate to mentor them and then have them head on to another district. And then what kind of support is available for them to pass the praxis? Because if you're not doing the traditional route to teaching with a 4-year degree, passing those tests can be very difficult. So if you could speak to the teacher residency.
Yeah, so I think we continue to look at that partnership. I know that we have one of our teachers right now that we've been working with and continues to, go through that first year teaching. And I think the piece that we've looked at is just continuing to figure out like what additional supports can we be putting in place. It's interesting, we were just at a meeting today, and I'll do a presentation for you later on this year on our teacher evaluation model. And believe it or not, that's one of the reasons that a lot of new teachers fizzle out, because right now the way the structure is in place, you're essentially asking people to do two completely different heavy tasks. And so we were working hard today on really aligning that. And so, going back to the TRP question, I think that's what we're really trying to look at is what continue to be barriers for individuals, whether they're in the program or whether they complete the program and now are in a classroom, and are there things that we can be doing better to, to continue to help with that. We're excited for next year. We did put in and are crossing our fingers that we'll be one of the districts that gets a special education TRP candidate. To look at that. And so we're continuing to kind of look and recruit that piece. But it's been interesting because even in talking to some of our paraeducators and things like and trying to encourage people to go in there, many of them are enjoying the roles that they're in and are like, I'm good, and so I think it's trying to just find that balance of those pieces. But I think to just answer your question simply is continuing to reflect on our practices, what can we do better? And then partnering with TRP to let them know what we think they can do better for candidates too, as they continue to progress through what's a fairly new program for us.
I also am really interested in connecting with universities on a different model. I'm a prime example of somebody who was recruited by a principal. I had finished high school, I didn't have my bachelor's, and she paved a way for me to connect with WestCon and connected me with their financial aid office and the HR department, in Danbury where I worked with them as well to get me an entrance. They let me, apply for free and whatever. And then once I got in, did my entrance exam and did well, they funneled funding towards me. So wow, you're in honors, or you did this, you did extremely well. And they kept that process going. And it wasn't something that was done intentionally. It was something that was just done haphazardly because I happened to be excelling. And I, to be honest with you, I would go in all the time to fill in paperwork or whatever. And I think I was dragging my children with me. So I was a non-traditional student, and they I think that kind of made them remember me and remember my name. And when something came up, they reached out to me. And so when you think about being creative in partnerships, looking for somebody who's already done their bachelor's, already saddled with student loan debt, and saying, hey, you can go to this program, it's gonna be really rigorous, you work during the day and you have to do it at night, that's an ask, and it's a heavy ask, which I think is why you're finding a lot of candidates aren't interested in doing that. Life-changing is when I'm working as a paraprofessional and I don't have my bachelor's, and you can bring me from making, $30,000 to making $50,000. That's life-changing. And I think that we really have to be more creative about how we who we're looking to support, and who walking into that, is that going to make a difference and develop a lifelong passion for this field. Like, it doesn't matter, it's not the most lucrative field, but you're not here because it's a lucrative field. You're here because you want to make a difference for kids. And I think that when you can change someone's life, you have somebody who's going to be determined to stay in this field. And although we want to do this work and make sure they stay with our district, I would say that I spent a lot of time with the former superintendent in Danbury when I was there, and he, was openly excited to see that I was still in the field and I was still thriving in this field. And that's really our goal, because no matter where you go, you're going to be impacting children. You're going to be making that difference. So I also think that we want to start exploring some other options to see what else is being done. And I haven't been able to find anyone, I've tried, who's taken on that task of partnering with the district and taking people from high school diploma to having your teaching degree. And that's really, like, if you really want the answer to how we fix, this shortage, that's it. It's hard to ask somebody to already have your bachelor's, be paying all those student loans, and then go back and, we'll do this, and it's, we're going to help you do it, but you have life responsibilities by that point. That's a big ask. So I'm really interested in finding other partnerships as well.
Yeah, and I think, Shannon, I think you had mentioned it earlier. One of the things that we're, wrestling with a little bit is, at the end of the day, like, yeah, West Hartford's my priority, and I feel comfortable that I can go recruit a lot of people away from other districts. But I'm like, at the heart of this, is that really what's at the heart of it, And so I think for us is trying to look at and be creative about those pieces, because to be honest with you, the last thing I want is just a revolving door of educators moving from different districts because, they think the grass is greener. And I believe we have the greenest grass, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's what was at the heart of this. And so I appreciate, and Teresa's brought a really creative thinking and lens to some of that work, and really gets it. And so I think we're trying to look at, although we certainly want to continue and nurture some of the different pieces we've already done, I think is now trying to look at, like, what is the new creative thing that we could be innovative with? Because if you remember, FEOD, when we started that, no one had heard of it. No one was really doing it. And then everyone was knocking on our doors. Hey, how did you start that program? And now it's like common. Like I was at a conference across the country where a school there was doing it. And I'm like, I remember when no one was doing this. So I think right now we're trying to figure out what's the new that no one's doing yet. So.
I'll just say, I think I've got some connections related to the connection from high school graduation, or graduate from a high school into someone who may have gone right into a different career route and now wants to get back into the education path. That's something that we're working on. And Educators Rising, I don't know if you're partnered with them already. The last thing I would just mention is that we're working at the state level to modernize the teacher certification regulations, which I'm curious, maybe off line we could talk about if there's specific barriers that have stood in the way of you being able to hire certain candidates through a more creative path, because the certification requirements or even the preparation requirements for ed prep stood in the way of you being able to get those candidates, because we're trying to address that. And you kind of get one bite at the apple when you're changing regulations, so we're hoping to make them as agile as possible so we don't have to wait another 25 years before we change them. But input would be really, really valuable. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And to be honest, I found the folks that I talked to at the State Department to be very responsive. I think the challenge that they seem to run into is it's like, if you can't check the box, like, you can't check the box. And so on my end, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this is, this person's actually more qualified than the box. And they're like, yep, nope, sorry. And so I'd love to share some of those anecdotes, because I think that's ultimately what ends up killing me when I have a phenomenal candidate that at the end of the day I've seen and is outstanding with kids, and I can't get them in the classroom because they don't have the inability to check that box. And to get them to do that is like so much work. And it, again, I get it's a commitment from someone, but at some point, I think if you have all these different degrees or even a certificate in something, like if I can teach sixth grade, like why can't I teach fifth? Is it that much different? Do I need to do a whole different program? So, but I'll get off that soapbox because I was on it earlier today.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one, and this is sort of at a different tangent. I go with the thought process of what gets measured gets done. So my question to you is, have you defined what success is? Not to say it should be stationary, but I didn't get that sense when I read the document.
Yeah, I think so. When you look at, if you remember the graph that sort of showed our demographics, I think ultimately our goal will be to try to mirror those.
Okay.
I think
Do
that's.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. When you were doing this, you said this is, I think, you're hiring. Is that hiring or is that workforce?
Workforce.
That's what I assumed it was, but I thought you said
Yep.
hiring.
Yeah, and that's our student population, so I think I'm probably blocking it with my head. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so I think that's what we're looking at. We know that's a very ambitious goal, and, but I think that's what's a priority for us is to have an ambitious goal and then sort of look at that.
Is there interim goals to get you there?
There are, I think, are you talking about specific measurement numbers?
Yeah.
So it's one of the things we've gone back and forth on, and we have not gone in that direction. I know that that'll be something that at some point we may want to tackle, but, based on some of the different conversations that I've had, it's really been advised to sort of stay away from those type of numeric numbers when it comes to hiring practices and to really take a focus and look at these pieces.
No, I can understand that. I just figured
Yeah.
you want to shoot for something, though.
Yeah, so our hope is to continue to see this little red box climb, but I know having a specific number, like I said, at this point wasn't something that we really were comfortable doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Gayle and then Claire. Yes.
Thank you. I had a question about, I guess maybe the definition of what you would define as diversity. Because when I look at this data right up there, you're talking about, educators of color. But, diversity, I think, could probably go way, way beyond that. And I wonder, do you look at just that one parameter, or do you look beyond that? So, just like as an example of what I'm talking about is, and you may not know this, and I don't, I'm just sort of throwing it out there, but like, for example, like, what is the percentage of women teachers versus men in our school? I would assume, and I could be totally wrong, but I would assume that there are many, many more women teachers than there are men. And, when you talk about just sort of this one little niche of diversity, I wonder, do you ever look beyond that, and do you try to correct for that as well?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, so we look at everything, right? It's all important. It all matters. This plan specifically is talking about increasing educators of color. So that's definitely true. And I think, as Julio said at the outset, that is really the not just what the state is looking for, but it's really is a moral imperative. Like, we know that students do better, right, when they have opportunities for windows and mirrors, when they have an opportunity to have someone who's in front of them, who identifies with them and reflects their values and understands them, and students who don't match also, all research has shown that they benefit extremely as well with having that diversity. So this plan is specific to that point, but absolutely we look at diversity in all the different lenses. Like, so as a former elementary principal, I can tell you that a high priority for me was making sure that I had more male teachers within my building and to ensure that students were able to also, again, see themselves reflected. And so in elementary, you tend to be very heavy with female teachers. As the grades go higher, you tend to get, it starts to balance out a little bit more. You get more male teachers when you get to high school and secondary. But we do look at it all, and it all matters. This plan specifically, though, is absolutely calling to make sure that we are mirroring and allowing our students to see themselves reflected in the adults that are in front of them.
And I'll add one piggyback on that because say the elementary exam. I've been so quiet I had to jump in at one point. The elementary is a great example of the disproportionate number of female educators versus male educators. I'm very aware of it, and I would, Shannon's nodding her head. She'll tell you. The other thing that we definitely look at, all aspects, but just even experience. It's very possible at times to end up at a building and be, very veteran heavy, and that can be very positive. But it also has its, its unknowns. You block out potentially some of the newest learning, some of the most innovative trends within education that might be being promoted in teacher preparation programs, and or after, play it forward 5 or 10 years, you potentially block out a bigger age gap between the children and the teacher themselves, which can create, difficulties hard to foresee, perhaps, and just in terms of relatability or things of this nature. So we're always looking, and I would say that schools and administrators, we're always trying to make sure that we have that right balance. But in terms of how formalized is the planning and such, I think Teresa stated it well, that the state has given us a very specific charge based on a very known and visible gap. And it's something that's not new to West Hartford or really new to Connecticut in terms of, we've been working at this for quite a while. And while we've made, I've said this to student groups, a teacher's tenure, a teacher's career is typically 35 years. So it can take a long time to create an opening, and it can take a long time to push numbers up quickly. And, and there in the candidate pool, in order for us to have giant changes in our statistics, we would need, giant pools of educators to be reflecting whatever the target demographic was, and those giant pools just don't currently exist, at least certainly not within Connecticut. And so that's why I'm excited by some of the marketing efforts that we also heard about. But an absolutely valid and important question.
You all set?
So I had one other question about credentialing, which I don't know anything about how you credential teachers, but you said one thing that just sort of made me question whether there would be an attempt, or would you change the credentialing model that you currently have, which again, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, to try to, take certain teachers that now don't necessarily meet the standards that, or the credentials that, we've typically used. Because
No.
you had said, like you have these great candidates, but obviously there's something missing in their credentialing to be able to teach. And
Yeah, and it's not, sorry to interrupt, it's not necessarily that they can't teach, it's the grade levels they can teach at. So for instance, you have someone who goes to a university, goes through a program, and they're certified, let's say, a K6, like that's their certification, so they can only teach K6. Or we have people that are like a K1 only cert. And so if you're only K1 and they're like, man, I'd love to teach third grade and I have the opening, like there's nothing I can do. I can't put them there. Or again, the K6, if we have a program that teaches 6, 7, 8, they can't go because they're not certified in that. And I think that's the piece, and I think, Shannon, that's what you're alluding to, is the state's been very open about like, hey, we've got to look at some of these things because they just don't really make sense. It's not a West Hartford, like I don't get to make decisions on that, is ultimately they have their certification, whatever the state has granted them, and then if there's something we're trying to see, we may work with the state and say, hey, what does this person need to do? Is it just, sometimes it may be take just an assessment, sometimes it may be, no, they need to go take additional coursework or whatever that would be, so that we can ultimately work with, and that's what I'll do, is I'll meet with someone and say, here's what you need to do, I've talked to the state, and here's when the test is, you can go sign up for that, or if you want to go back to a program, here's some of them. Because as Paul said, sometimes when you do something for, 25 years, maybe you're looking for a change. Like, you're not looking to get out of education, maybe you're just looking to get out of first grade. But if you have that cert, which, let's be honest, right, when you're, starting your career off and you get that, you don't always think like, hey, maybe getting that cert, might pigeonhole me a little bit if that's not something what I want long term. So that's what I meant by that.
We wouldn't be manipulating any of the credentialing to, I guess
No.
that's,
All the-
yeah,
all
I wasn't
the-
talking about like a teacher, because all those people are teachers. But,
All the
some
credentialing happens through the Bureau of Certification at the State Department of Ed. So yeah, it's all out of our hands in that regard.
Yeah, and I'll just go down the rabbit hole real quick with you, Gayle, is that I literally, at the beginning of the year, I have to put in every single teacher that works for us, and I have to check the box for what they teach. And if it doesn't align with their certification, it'll pop. And that's something that, we just couldn't do that. It wouldn't even allow us to do that in the state's system. So, so that's why we're always, and that's the work that we'll do, like with my principals, I'll meet with Shannon and we'll look at, hey, here's the holes, who do we have, what are we looking to do, what are we looking to fill, but there really is no, not that we would even want it, there is no workaround for it because it all has to get reported through the state and tracked that way.
Claire?
Yeah, so I understand this is about people of color. It's a state mandate to have a retention and recruitment program. I do agree with Gayle, though, at some point in the board meetings, I'd love to know the percentage of male and female. The state or the U.S. numbers are about 19%, 80% women, 80.5. And so it is very important to identify, and I always notice in elementary that a woman's classroom can be very different than a man's classroom, and some boys and girls, react differently, and it's a great opportunity. And so I think in some of our elementaries, we have very few men, and some we have more men. Even in a school more diverse, hopefully we have more diverse educators in that school, because the more kids see people successful that look like them, the more they see their opportunities, and the more they feel like, oh, I can be a leader too. So I think this growth is great, and I think it's only going to increase. But as you mentioned, so are all the other towns. So there's only so much in the pool. Also, bringing men to this profession, it's not a poor paying profession, but it's not the business track that you can go on when you want to support a family. And it's a tough road for some men to go into this field. So I do hope there's more elementary male teachers in the future, and hope that's part of a conversation.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy. We can easily report on it. I feel like it might be data that's available when we do our performance and profile report, PPR in May, but I don't know that it's broken down by level, but we'll certainly look at that and talk about how we can best report things to you.
Gender, right? Like that's, I think sometimes when you're not seeing data reported in certain ways, it's also because, legally, right, when you think about people, how people identify, I don't think that we have necessarily caught up with that. And I want to, as the equity person, it would be remiss of me to not bring that up as well, right? Sorry.
No apologies. No. Any other questions? Yes, Liam.
Yeah, I'm just curious, just looking in the middle and high school, is there a way that we are promoting diversity within like different school subjects? Just going into sort of like the gender behind it, like I know for me personally, from middle school to high school, in math class, I have had a male educator for every year except I believe my freshman year. So I'm curious if there's a way that we're going to promote diversity in those different subject fields.
I do love, so I love having students on the board. Yeah, absolutely, right. And I actually just met today with our computer science guru who's talking about that, and that's again a top priority. In those conversations, to be honest with you, about who's in class and who feels like they're qualified and capable of what, starts at our elementary, and making sure that we are sure that all students see themselves as capable and able to approach whatever subject matter that that they want to do, right? And so we're doing lots of planning and talking. I do think it starts with the students that we are kind of helping work through, and so that they can see themselves in those, going into mathematics and going into advanced math, et cetera. But it's it's the work I think that we collectively have to do as a field. To make sure that we're not shutting doors for our students, despite gender or anything else, that they can walk in whatever path and they can see themselves in that path. But I agree with you. It'd be great for you to have had a woman math teacher in the last. I won't go on, but I agree with you. Thank you for that, Liam.
Any other questions? All right. LaToya.
I'm just thinking about the recruiting of, thinking about bringing more, as there was the statement about men, and I would assume like men of color, and just kind of want to lift up something important to consider, that in the state of Connecticut, Black people represent almost half of the prison population, and about 30% of that is Black men. So we need to think about, I think one of the things is it's hard to get them in these positions because there's a lot of them missing from their families and communities. So I think we have to get them early. Like you said, there was a student that, you kind of connected with, and then, they went through the program and came back and was able to work. So I think especially with our boys of color, even before high school, we need to get them in elementary school, seeing being an educator as a superhero in the community, and how that could really kind of shift the narrative for their family, change things at a generational level. But I think just thinking about those incarceration statistics in Connecticut, which are I think 3 times the national average, and we're a small state, that speaks volumes. So I think we got to really think about how we get those boys early, before other things happen. So, thanks.
Other questions or comments? I just have a couple of thoughts I want to share. Thank you so much again. Wonderful presentation. Wonderful presentation. Very much appreciate the authentic way in which you are exploring this and looking at what has been done and what may need to be revisited and revised. In particular, referring to how interviews are conducted. And I think it's important to know that, yes, we are a wonderful district with many different schools. 11 of them being elementary schools, we still are of the same district. And so for that reason, it's important that the values and principles that one may have at one school applies no matter what school setting they're in. And the questions bringing them in can reflect that. So thank you so much. And also appreciate the creative ways in which you are recruiting. I heard you make reference to HBCUs. I'm a proud HBCU alumna. Absolutely. Explore in those regards, very much so. And just collectively, thank you for recognizing the different path that people take to get to where you are. Teresa, I very much appreciate you sharing your story and your journey in an authentic way. And look at how wonderful you are doing. And you are testimony. You are testimony to just what you are striving to practice and preach as well. So all of you, thank you so very much for all that you do and all that you're continuing to do. And we look forward to hearing updates. But before we move on, we are going to formally seek a motion that the Board of Education accept and approve the Increasing Educator Diversity Plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Shannon. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Claire. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much.
Wait, don't put that up, please. I think Andy needs. Are you next? Dr. Morrow, are you next?
And as we make our transition, we next will have staff communications and reports, where we will receive our superintendent's report from our superintendent, Mr. Vicinas. Passing it to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the teams that have presented thus far. Great job. I'm going to begin with some celebrations. We have some wonderful things to celebrate. The first of which, Bugby and Morley students, Sora Sharkey, Emma Borer, Amelia Fradiani, and Joriel Miranda Emanuele were all celebrated at the past 25th annual Elementary Celebrations of the Arts for their outstanding contributions to the arts. This event took place at the AquaTurf on Tuesday, February the 6th. We were all here while they were being celebrated. Their families, their principals, and their teachers were also in attendance, and we were super proud of them. Given Chris's absence, some things he may have mentioned. Conard Senior Elise Biondi was recognized as an Artist of Promise at the Connecticut Regional Scholastic Arts Award. She was offered 90 total in Scouting to States. And Conard girls basketball recently fell to Windsor in the CCC semifinals, but we are very proud of their performance this year. You heard all kinds of amazing things from Liam in terms of track and field, as well as wrestling. Some additional news out of Hall recently shared the names of 3 College Board National Merit Competition finalists and 1 additional semifinalist. So congratulations going out to Henry Frank, semifinalist, and the finalists Alexander Hyams, Nora Kingwell, and Abea Sundar. Conard boasts 2 finalists, Jaden Schuler and Miles Moynihan. And interesting to note that only slightly greater than 1% of the roughly 1.4 million test takers meet the criteria as a national merit semifinalist, let alone a finalist. In terms of governance, some updates, the dedication of facilities, I've been updating you on this. Worthwhile to note that the ad hoc committees are being convened and they will be providing recommendations based on their discussions of nominations of, renaming of fields or facilities. Those specific individual requests are measured against a set of criteria, and those recommendations are expected at the end of this month. And I will look to bring any recommendations forward to the board somewhere as soon as mid-March. We've been talking about the change to kindergarten start date, and I believe I previously reported that we had a total of 65 requests for age waivers. Of these, this week and last, we've tested a total of 58 of them on the DIAL assessment, which is a nationally normed assessment tool that measures motor skills, language skills, and concepts, as well as informal measures that we're using to assess social and behavioral skills in order to make those individualized readiness assessments and recommendations. We'll be reviewing that data this week, and by the end of February, we will be sending individualized feedback to each family and conducting any additional follow-up communication with individual families as the case may go. We are prepared to conduct a second round of testing, probably somewhere in the April timeframe for those who missed testing for any reason due to illness or I forgot to write in or what have you. And we'll plan for an additional round of testing in late summer for folks who move into the district or are otherwise were unaware of this. There is a task force for the 250th anniversary of the forming of the nation called the 250 Task Force. This is a town-led task force with representation from the school district as well as a number of community volunteers. There is a website that has been put up onto the town website so folks can begin to learn about it. And very soon that website will list materials as to how folks can engage, become part of a task force, and help to plan for that celebration, which will obviously culminate in July of 2026. But the plan is to have educational events here at the school, as well as events happening across the town and the larger state leading up to July 2026 over the course of the next 2 years. I'm excited to share that kindergarten teacher Alexa Freitas of Charter Oak International Academy was recently published in a national teaching journal called The Mathematics Teacher, Learning and Teaching Pre-K-12. Her article titled Developing the Right Reasoning in Kindergarten Mathematics reflects a focus on critical mathematical thinkers and thoughtful writers across all grade levels and across all subjects within our schools. We're very proud of Alexa and kudos on that accomplishment. Those are my shares, pending any questions from the board.
Thank you so much. Questions? Yes, Claire.
Paul, can you clarify what will be shared with the board? Is it the designees that are being recommended for naming of fields, or is it the criteria that will be shared?
So what will happen is we would share both, assuming that there is a recommendation coming forward from an ad hoc committee. The first thing that we would do is sort of make an announcement of that. The first thing that we do is we would contact the nominee to ensure that they would accept the nomination, before we would bring it to a public vote or anything of that, just to ensure that the person does indeed willingness to accept the honor. We would then publish that name and give all of you forewarning, and certainly let you see the criteria for which the recommendation had already been based, but essentially so that you could review that, you could hear what the committee thought and why they're providing a positive recommendation. And there would also be the opportunity for, at that point, since the name would be out there, for any informal feedback to come to you by way of the public. And then it would be brought forward for your discussion and a vote to see if you would essentially confirm that recommendation and allow us to go forward with the naming.
And so they're not deceased. And so sometimes.
Or their family and survivors, should they be deceased, sure.
Okay. And then will there be just some kind of background check?
Absolutely.
Because, someone could be very popular within certain circles.
Having done the background check, then bring it forward, with some announcement so that there could be a period where others in the community might be able to provide any feedback or on the nomination itself, so that it could come forward to the board for a vote. So there are definitely layers upon layers within it.
Ethan.
Just to follow up on Claire's question, is all the fields going to be named, or they'll just only certain amount or percentage?
Yeah, no, great question. So, and I'm glad you're asking, because it provides me the opportunity. The naming and dedication of, many of our fields are already named, but the naming and dedication of any facility or any field, in order for it to really hold any weight, should realistically be a very infrequent occurrence. I don't know if it is something in the water or if it was some of the capital improvement work that was going on, but we had realistically something which seemed very unprecedented in terms of a number of requests that came forward this year, and are all in various stages within this process that we've had to develop in response to that. But it should be infrequent. It should be a very honorable thing, and because otherwise, if it became too commonplace, then it would lose the significance and the honor that's intended behind such a bestowing.
Other questions regarding our superintendent's update? All right, thank you so very much. And now moving on to staff reports and board discussions, where we will receive our multi-year enrollment projections. And so I'm seeing Dr. Murrow coming before us. All right.
All right, we'll give this a shot here with Liz's presentation. She was called away with a family emergency, but all is well. So she will be with us again shortly. So, as you saw in the report, on an annual basis, we estimate student enrollment for the upcoming year, and we prepare multi-year enrollment projections to help us with our long-term planning. It's one of the key factors that helps us determine space allocation, number of classrooms, class size, staffing levels, and the resources that we require in our budget, not only the capital budget, but also in our operating budget. The most recent analysis of our enrollment projections was issued by Power School in January of 2024. And based on our historical enrollment trends and anticipated new residential developments that seem to be popping up all over West Hartford, our projections indicate a consistent overall enrollment for the 10-year period ending in the school year 2033-34. So, as you can see from the chart behind me, enrollment has changed significantly over the past 35 years. In District K-12 enrollment in the 89-90 school year was 7,400 students. The district experienced year-over-year increases until the peak of 10,034 students in 2010-11. And during this time, we addressed facility and space needs to accommodate enrollment growth. That's when we added many of the portables that you've heard us talking about as we've been taking them off as they've been reaching their end of life. And since that peak, the district experienced gradual enrollment decline to 8,815 students in the 2022-23 school year. Currently, our enrollment is 8,836 students and is projected to vary by no more than 200 students over the next 10-year period. For our analysis, we utilize Power School's predictive enrollment analytics module, which is something that we started using last year. You may remember from the presentation we made last year. It's a new module for us that provides a tool to generate district-wide and school-specific grade level enrollment projections. And three major factors drive this: our kindergarten enrollment trends, our grade level cohorts, that's basically tracking students as they age through our system, and changes in the number of residential units within the district. This is information, the residential units that we actually receive from the town planning department and interface into Power School. Our kindergarten enrollment trends is kindergarten enrollment is a significant driver of future district enrollment. A trend at kindergarten from year to year, or a trend in the difference in the graduating cohort reflects in our overall total. The work that you see in this does reflect the 1 year kindergarten piece. You know, we expect to see maybe a 75 student gap in that if all of the planning comes to bear for that, but it's not going to be a significant change, and that will be then a 1 year piece. Kindergarten enrollment has been somewhat erratic. As you know, we've dealt with the post-COVID enrollment piece and the uncertainty with that. We feel that it's trending a little more consistently as our projection. When we look at cohort impact, typical student cohort ages from grade to grade. It's relatively unchanged from the previous year. The 2024-25 school year, 42 in the 2025-26 school year, an additional 30 students in the 26-27 school year. And we have included those students in our enrollment projections to increase the accuracy. Again, you know, the new buildings is a finite endeavor in West Hartford. Eventually, we will run out of conversions and new buildings and such, but we're feeling pretty confident about the next couple of years as these different projects are being brought online. An analysis of projection and trend by grade levels assumes that enrollment falls midway between the moderate and the conservative projections presented in the report. And so you can see that the Power School analytics gives us conservative and moderate estimates for the out years and such. Our planning tends to fall in the middle. We feel that that's a better estimate. And so by grade level, when we look overall, we don't see capacity needs for standard classrooms. We see at the elementary level, across the district's 11 elementary schools, we see an enrollment currently of just under 4,000, and projections indicate we'll see an increase of approximately 113 students over the next 3 years. before we experience a gradual decline to 3,823 students 10 years from now. Middle school forecast, on an overall basis, it increases gradually over the next 6 years from 1,994 to an estimated 2,178 before returning to approximately 2,100. This is increased primarily at King Philip. If you remember from our enrollment before, King Philip is currently a little bit under Sedgwick. And so the increase that we're seeing will be primarily at King Philip due to anticipated enrollment at the feeder elementary schools there. Sedgwick enrollment does not fluctuate significantly over a 10-year period, and enrollment at Bristow is capped and held steady. And then the high school forecast, enrollment at Conard is expected to be relatively consistent over the next 10 years. We're going to drop over the next few years from our current 1,403 students to 1,345 students before returning to approximately 1,411 by 2033. And at Hall, we're going to experience a similar trend. We're going to vary from our current enrollment of 1,395 students to approximately 1,432 over the next 10 years, with minor fluctuations is the projection. So again, we don't see, based on our 10-year enrollment projections, any capacity issues for standard classrooms in the school. However, based on our increased need for specialized services, providing one-on-one or small group setting, we continue to assess our space needs at individual schools. As you know, when we talk about enrollment, it's difficult to have that transfer into, well, if we have 100 fewer students, don't we need 4 fewer classrooms? Remember that students are spread over 17 different buildings and 17 different programs, and so if we're looking at 30 fewer students in first grade, when you spread that across the 11 elementary schools, the odds of it actually impacting losing a classroom or a teacher is pretty slim. And so we're open to any questions you might have, and I'll do my best to wander through them for you.
Thank you so very much for the information. Well presented. Questions, comments regarding what has been shared? Yes, Jason.
I was just curious if we could get the school data. So for each of the schools, what the trends will look like going out 10 years?
We have that. We can, I don't know if that was provided in here or not. We usually do it by grades for that. We can provide that by school. It's difficult. It's a little more difficult than some of that because of, again, when they're estimating at the grade level, they're projecting based on neighborhood turnovers and such. It's a little less certain at specific schools, but we can certainly provide.
Claire.
I'm assuming this enrollment data on pre-K, a 10-year, I know that's a loaded.
Other questions? All right, thank you so very much. Moving on to personnel actions, where we will have Mr. Julio Duarte to report. Returning once again.
All right, I hope to leave you as passionate and excited as my last report was from this one, but I don't think so. So a detailed overview of our personnel report can be found on page 85 of your board packet. As per district policy, I'm required to update the board on any changes that we have had with our certified staff. So tonight I will provide you with a summary of the numbers as they are reflecting all the changes since my last presentation in December. As you can see in this month's report, we had 2 resignations. We also hired 4 contracted teachers and 3 interim teachers. And so thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Questions? Gayle.
So I just had a question because we had been talking before about retention of teachers, and whenever we get these reports, we always have that people resign for personal reasons. Is that like really true, or is that just what we're putting out here? I'm just asking in terms of retaining these teachers for, like, for example, one of these teachers, just started in 2023, and she's already leaving in the beginning of 24. So my question is basically, do we have other information that maybe you're not sharing because for whatever reason, but that, you would shed light on some of our retention issues?
Yeah, sure. And again, if I think I'll probably do it at the end of the year. It might actually be at the opening schools report next year because I'll have all of that data at that point. This year with the survey that we're putting out, again, it's optional, but we're hoping to have better data to be able to provide to you. The challenge is with disclosing specifics is, especially when you have such small numbers, from a privacy issue, we don't really get into that. But I do know, and I've actually met with both of these candidates to get an understanding of why they're leaving. Like I said, I'm hopeful that with our new presentation, our new format, when we do our opening schools report, I'll be able to really give you a more detailed analysis based on what folks have reported. Because right now what it really requires is I'll email them and invite them to an exit interview. Oftentimes people take me up on it, sometimes they don't. But the reasons to report out here publicly are going to be something generic like that, at least for the time being. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand when someone's name is attached to it, obviously, but is it possible to, because there's been times when you've given us many, many, many more resignations on a report, and they all are resigning for personal reasons. So is there a way to, without attaching it to someone's name, to have more information as to why people are truly leaving, or maybe they're all really leaving for personal reasons? But I understand, if it's attached to someone's name, it's hard to, give much information.
If I understand your question, and if I understand what Julia was saying as well, because I think you do, I think I understand what you're asking. I think it's most appropriate to try to report that out probably once per year when we have the aggregate of all and say, okay, this many folks left for percentage for retirement. This many folks say it was a promotion to a position that might have taken them out of district. But it would be most appropriate, I would think, to be able to protect the anonymity, to be able to do that once per year. And so I hear that's what Mr. Duarte is happy to commit to.
We do. So if you recall our opening schools report, when I presented at that time, there is a graph in there where I do designate, I think there's maybe 6 more specific options that would be in there. So I think moving forward, we've actually even increased that a little bit more than 6 to see if we can dive a little deeper into those specificities. But we do, and what I do with my office is I go in and track them myself and then report them at the beginning of the school year. As Paul said, it's easier for me to report, if we have 30 people that left, I put them all in there and then no one can really connect the dots to that. But certainly, and can share that with Paul, and you can reshare the opening school report so that you can see the data from last year if you'd like.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you so very much. And now moving on to routine matters, approval of the minutes. Seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting of February the 6th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Shannon. Any discussion? All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. Moving on to information and reports. Do we have any communications and reports from other boards or organizations? Any other information or discussions? I do just want to briefly say, in a point of privilege, recognizing this is our last meeting in February, and the next time we come together, it will be March. And we know that most often we do recognize February as Black History Month, and that is something we certainly as a district take pride in. And I do that as well. However, as we know, when it comes to celebrating the achievements and contributions of Black Americans in this country, that can be celebrated year-round. And so proud of our district in recognizing that. Certainly the report that we previously had in terms of our efforts of recruiting more diverse populations reflects that. But again, this is Black History Month, but Black history is American history, and that is something that we must not ever forget, and we can recognize that year-round. With that, moving on to future business. Announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, March the 5th, 2024, where we'll have our regular Board of Education meeting and presentation of the superintendent's budget at 7 o'clock here at the Town Hall, followed by Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024, budget workshop number 1, 7 o'clock here at the Town Hall. Then again, Tuesday, March the 19th, 2024, regular Board of Education meeting, 7 o'clock here at the Town Hall. And then Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, our Board of Education public hearing at 7 o'clock, followed by budget workshop number 2, all here at the Town Hall. Do we have a request for any future agenda items? Seeing none, do we have any visitors who would like to? Oh, no visitors, all right. We do not have an executive session. With that, seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Shannon. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Meeting adjourned at 9:07.